In today's episode, I will be talking to Maxwell Ivey, who has been called the blind blogger. Maxwell helps people be free from their fears and discusses why interdependence is necessary. It's an interesting conversation that includes a discussion on the authenticity of influencers and how to ask for opportunities. Stay tuned to the Maverick Paradox podcast. Before we begin our conversation, here is a quick shout out to the pathologically curious. Check out the Maverick Paradox magazine. It's a digital magazine written by Mavericks for business owners and professionals. You can find the magazine at themaverickparadox.com. The magazine's aim is to provoke maverick leadership everywhere. Welcome to the Maverick Paradox podcast, where we explore what it is to be a maverick and discover effective modes of leadership. I am Judith Germain, and my mission is to propel the maverick mindset into a world where character and integrity will ultimately have a higher premium than personality and bureaucracy. So thank you for joining me on this journey. If you would like to continue with me, then please subscribe to my podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, or one of the other popular podcast platforms. Hi, Maxwell.
Hi, Judith.
How are you?
I'm doing good. How are you doing?
I'm doing all right, actually. Tell me about you.
Well, I am a totally blind man who grew up in a family of carnival owners. I was lucky enough to be part of that business for about 15 years before my dad's death eventually led to the closure of our small traveling show. After his death, I started my own website, the Midway Marketplace, where I help people sell surplus amusement equipment. In order to do that, I had to learn a lot of new things, such as how to hand code HTML, recruiting clients, setting fees, recording video, building email lists, a lot of that stuff that everybody struggles with when they start a new online business. People were inspired by it, and they encouraged me to start sharing more of what it is to be an entrepreneur who happens to be blind. And that led to the blindblogger.net, which has also resulted in 3 self-help books, public speaking, dozens of interviews, traveling cross-country solo, and starting my own podcast, the What's Your Excuse Show.
Cool. You sound very accomplished.
Well, I tell people one of the best things you can do is to, 1, create a good intro, or to have somebody create one for you, and 2, make a list, because a lot of times we do great things, but we don't realize it because we don't take the time to appreciate just how far we've come, how much we've done, how much we've learned. And that's one of those things you can really appreciate if you make a list.
Yeah, and I think that it's easy to forget when you do, because you move on to the next thing.
Exactly. Yes.
I thought today we could talk about interdependence, because I know that's something that you're interested in.
Right. It's one of the things that people ask me to talk about most. And it's one of the things that I feel like I can do the most good for people, especially for entrepreneurs. And basically, I grew up with retinitis pigmentosa, RP, a degenerative eye disease. So I knew from an early age I would most likely lose my vision. And so I have always been told, don't be afraid to ask. People will want to help you. They will want to answer your questions. Don't be afraid to ask for opportunities. And as my dad always used to say, if you don't ask, they can't say yes. So I was taught from an early age that there's no shame or fear to be involved in asking, whereas most everybody else has been raised with quite a bit of shame attached to the whole idea of admitting that you need help or information from anyone else. And I like to start by getting people to focus on the other person instead of focusing on themselves, because if we can get out of the space of ego, if we can get out of our own heads and look at it from the other person's point of view, it makes it so much simpler, which is why I tell people, when you refuse to ask, you rob the other person of the joy they would have received from helping you. I'm sure that you know that even the smallest thing, if you do it for somebody else without expecting anything back in return, you get amazing emotional response from that. You feel better. Your energy level is higher. And it's the same way for accomplished people. Many of them have spent years learning a craft, accumulating information, studying for degrees and certificates. And one of the best things you can do for them is to go up to them and go, hey, I know you know this. I'm struggling. I'm stuck. Would you please help? And if you do that sincerely and you follow their advice once they give it to you, you have just made this person's day, and you've given them something nobody else can give them by not being afraid to ask.
I think that's really true, because the reverse is also true, isn't it? When you help someone and then they don't appreciate the extra time and effort you've taken to help them, and it can, and for some people it might stop them from wanting to help other people.
I'm glad you brought that up. I haven't really talked about the other side of it, but you're right. If you extend yourself and you help somebody, and the first person you help or the fourth or fifth person you've helped doesn't show the proper gratitude for what you did, it does make you less willing to offer to help in the future. So when people do reach out, because one of the things I have learned is it's difficult to get people to ask for help. It is incredibly more difficult to get them to accept help that was offered that they didn't remember asking for. Because for some reason that implies, well, it's obvious there's something wrong with me, or they wouldn't have thought I needed their help. That's usually the emotions that come up at that point. And what I like to point out to people is you did ask for their help. You just didn't ask for it out loud, or you didn't know you were asking, because we send out things subliminally, body language, in our words that we use in blog posts and comments, on social media, in conversations. We often let other people know what we need without being willing to come out and ask for it, or without remembering that we may have said some of those words out loud instead of just in our heads. And then somebody does act on it. They come along and they ask you. For example, I met the editor of my books, Lorraine, regularly I was commenting on blog posts, because it's still one of my favorite ways to generate traffic for your website, because one, it helps the blogger and the podcaster to get those comments. It brings attention to them in the search engines. Two, it gives you a chance to be seen by the people who are already following their blog. So there's a lot of great benefits in doing it. Plus, it never hurts to share your ideas and use that as an opportunity to get more sure, more definite in what you actually think and believe. It's a good platform for all of those things. As a blind person who was blogging and commenting, I was concerned that my blog was not visually appealing. I never came out and asked somebody to go look at my website, at least not the blind blogger. I used to do it all the time with the Midway Marketplace. But with the blind blogger, I didn't come out and ask somebody to go look and say, but one of the people who was following me online went to my website to leave a comment, noticed that my images were being centered improperly and they were hiding the text, making it hard for people to read my posts. And as you know, if we make it even slightly difficult for people, they go somewhere else. If you make it really hard, they are not going to stay around and try to read through the pictures. And so she reached out. She said, Max, I noticed that you're having a problem with this. I would like to help you with it. So there are many ways we let people know what we want. And sometimes they listen, they pay attention, and they offer to help. But unfortunately, quite often when that happens, it brings up those feelings of inadequacy. And you think, well, what's wrong with me that they think I have to have their help? So there's a lot of emotions, a lot of baggage in the whole area. But if people would just learn to ask for help, to accept it when offered, and to just say thank you and move on, they would make so much more progress. There would be so much more growth in their business and even in their personal lives.
That makes sense. And so do you think that's one of the reasons that's stopping people from going to coaches and mentors for support, because they feel like they should already know?
Exactly. I agree with you totally there. People feel like if they have to ask a coach or a mentor, no matter how many people like you and me who write about it and talk about it and say everybody who's anybody that's successful has a coach, people still feel like they should be doing this all on their own. They don't feel like they should have to ask. And, to not to defame the profession, but there are quite a few coaches who are only in the business of coaching to generate 6 or 7 figures. And I think that does turn off a lot of people who genuinely want help, but are not sure, one, who do I ask? How do I know if this person will actually be able to help me? And is it an investment I can afford or that I'm prepared to make in myself? There's a lot of questions that go into that. And the number of coaches who are really, if you look at what they put on their websites and in their social media work, they're just way too much focused on the bottom line, the dollars, as opposed to the number of people they have helped or are helping. And there are a lot of great coaches too, but it takes time to find them. And when you're at that point where, you really don't think you should have to ask in the first place, and you're starting the process of trying to find one, it's just a sea of people, faces, and information. And I'm sure it creates that overwhelmed sense for people, and they decide, no, maybe I don't really need a coach. The other thing that I've noticed a lot of, and I really dislike it. I hate to use the word hate, but there are way too many people online who are influencers or who have big platforms who go out of their way to make it look like it's a one-man show or a one-woman show. Bloggers and podcasters that have teams do not do a good enough job of showing the people out here who is on their team. And a team doesn't have to be paid. It can be volunteers, interns, friends, family. It can even be fans of a show who volunteer. I recently heard of several cases where fans set up social media accounts and created followings bigger than the hosts were having at the same time. So, but it seems like, we've got way too many online people who they hide the team. They are like the Wizard and the Wizard of Oz. There's this whole huge machinery behind that curtain, and they make sure nobody ever looks back there.
So do you think that's a form of fear in itself then from the podcaster or the blogger?
I definitely agree with that, because they feel like if they admit that they have to have help, then it will make them less desirable and somebody the audience won't want to listen to as much. And it's ironic that in a platform, blogging and podcasting, where we're all talking about how authenticity is the key, how open, honest, sharing, putting yourself out there is how you generate a community. At the same time, we have a lot of people who fear letting the community see that real person because they're afraid it will mean less viewers, less traffic, less likes, and less money.
Yeah. And I understand that you help people get over their own fears, or as you put it, free them from their fears. What would you say are the key steps in that process?
I would say the most important step, one is make sure that what you want to do is your goal and not somebody else's goal.
Yeah.
We have too many people who are doing what their parents think they should, or what their friends think they should, or doing what they see other people being successful at because they think, well, that doesn't look too hard. I could do that and be much more successful and have more fun than I'm having in my current position. So the first part is to make sure it's your goal. The second thing that's really important is to decide what success looks like for you, because success is or should be unique. It should be different based on the person that's deciding on it. And your definition of success can change over time. When I published my first book, I was like, let's just sell one copy, which was kind of, very limited goal, a very small goal, considering how much time and effort goes into publishing, even self-publishing a book. But I was like, let's get one sale. And then it was like, the second one, let's get at least 10 5-star reviews. Let's sell at least 50 copies. Every time I publish, I set higher goals for the next book. So deciding what success looks like you and being willing to change what success looks like over time as you grow, those are two very important things. And then I would say a third one is to just do what you can do about it today, to try to focus on the small manageable pieces to the big goal, because far too many people have great starts, but they get stuck in the middle because they start looking around at everything that they're going to have to do to accomplish their goal, and they get overwhelmed. They scare themselves out of continuing. And, that's for people who have made a good start, but there can be so many things. For example, if when I first started telling people that I was a blind blogger, they're like, man, how does a blind person blog? Because think about all you have to do. You have to write the post. You have to edit the post. You have to add the photos and links. You have to create the website or blog or some platform where people can find it. You have to share on social media, build an email list, reply to comments, reply to social media, comment on other people. So, and those are just the things I can think of off the top of my head without going too long on you there. So when you start and focus on one or two things you can do today, preferably small things that you can repeat over time, and not allow yourself to get distracted, overwhelmed, and scared by everything it's going to take to get to that end goal.
That sounds like a good plan, actually. And I think it's interesting, the first one about making it your own goal, because I agree there are a lot of people that seem to like I see a lot of, when I go out networking, you see a lot of people who say do accountancy exams and never become accountants, but they did it because their parents thought they were good with numbers, or
Yep.
people that went to law school and never then went on to practice.
Right. At one time, I got a degree in political science from Texas A&M Corpus Christi. I applied to law schools but was not accepted. I entered a program for the blind in Little Rock, Arkansas, where they trained you to be automated collection center people for the Internal Revenue Service. I did that for 2 years until I decided that my sanity was worth more than they were paying me. And I said, I could go home and make this kind of money carnying and have a lot less stress in my life. In a little over 2 years, I had 4 people threaten to commit suicide.
Oh, wow.
I spent a lot of my time talking to people who got that. There's a nasty letter that the IRS sends out when they've gotten to the end of their rope and they want to get your attention. It used to be called the LT11. It says everything they can do to you. It doesn't say they will or that they're going to do it today, but the implication was that they're going to do all that nasty stuff to us right now. So I spent a lot of time talking to crying moms and scared dads, and people were like, you're going to throw me out of my house. I'm going to be on the street. No, that's not our intent. So, after a while, I just got tired of that. So I went back to the carnival. I did the carnival for 15 years. And then when the carnival went out of business, and there wasn't an option for me to stay in that business, I started something else. And the most important lesson I learned from that period of time is, one, there may come a time where you have to accept that something is over and go on to something new. And the other thing is 12 years ago this month, 12 years ago this month, I filed for a domain name, midwaymarketplace.com. Had no idea how I was going to build a website. Had no idea what it took to be online or have a business of my own at all. But I took that one step. I sent them that $24, which I think is what a domain registry was in 2012. I had my brother sign me up, and it was 4 months later before we finally had an actual working website. But in the meantime, I did the work. I did what I could, which was, reach out to friends and family and go, hey, I'm starting this new website. Would you let me sell your rides? Reaching out to people who vend equipment and going, I think I can help you find people to buy your stuff. And day by day until, in January, we had a website. And then that was when the real learning started, because then I had to learn about social media and email and so many other things that go into promoting a site once you have it. But I always remember back to September 27th, 2012, when I came home disgusted, broke, after the best event on our calendar, and I said, I'm done. I'm going to, if I'm ever going to do this, I'm going to do it now. And I took that one small step that day.
That sounds brilliant. So would you say that you are willfully independent, that you're a maverick in what you do, or in your mindset?
Well, I would say I'm a maverick, but I wouldn't say I'm willfully independent. As a matter of fact, I have recently had some, let's just say, some tense moments with people when being at events where there were more blind or otherwise, or people otherwise disabled there than there were who were sighted.
Uh-huh.
I have this approach that to me, there's nothing wrong with asking for help or depending on other people. It doesn't make me less of a person or less independent. It just comes down to the way I do things. I would much rather put my hand on somebody's shoulder and follow them to my destination, even if I just met them 5 minutes ago, than to try to navigate that same stretch of space with my white cane all by myself. Because in the meantime, I could have had a great conversation with the person that I was following. I could have been focusing on what I'm going to do next, my elevator pitch. Maybe I was going to give a talk that day, so I could be thinking about my speech or my joke or something. So to me, I'm not what you would call wildly independent. And I especially know that whenever I'm around people who are fiercely independent. But to me, it seems like if your goal is to be independent, just for the sake of being independent, for saying that you don't need anybody or that you're not going to let yourself need anybody, to me, that's just a horrible way to live.
Yeah, I agree. And that's not how I define willfully independent. So for me, when I say the willfulness is more mischievous, more a smirk as opposed to an unruly or stubborn. It's more of a case of, I believe this is the way I need to go and I'm going to get there. But it's not the, I'm going to do it in a way that hurts other people, or I'm going to do it in a way that discounts other people's help.
Right.
Do you know what I mean? So it's more about a bit of a cliche, but seeing the fear and doing it anyway.
Somebody recently gave me a great quote about fear. He said, and he still hasn't told me who said this, but apparently somebody said, courage is knowing that there will be pain and doing it anyway. Insanity is knowing that there will be pain and doing it anyway. The problem is that both, they're both the same. And I've probably just gotten it totally wrong. But back to your point about willful independence, I have often said I would rather get my way with a smile, a handshake, and asking nicely than I would by throwing a tantrum or asking somebody to, or making the point to somebody that they need to change things just to make things right for me. I'm the last person that's going to have an argument with cashiers or other service people. I'm usually the kind of person who's going to be, let's just pay the bill and go home kind of a person. But I like what you said about a smirk. I'm not sure that I can manage a smirk, but I do know that that I have no shame when it comes to asking for help and asking for opportunities. And so maybe I do have a little bit of a smirk. It's just, and it could just be one of those things I've never thought about before. And we talked about that earlier. Sometimes you do things or you have characteristics in your personality and you don't really know they're there until somebody asks you or calls you out on it. So you've given me something to think about today, and that doesn't happen very often. So you should definitely give yourself a pat on the back for doing that. I mean, you've made me ask myself, do I have a rascal in me to some extent? I'm gonna have to think about that because that's never the way I would have saw myself. So thank you.
Well, that's really cool because I think it's that kind of mavericks don't really care really how people perceive them, so they have no issue in saying I can't do that, and not worry that people so like as a leader you might not know the answer, but you don't have any problem with not knowing the answer because you can still solve it. So I remember working somewhere and the MD asked a question like, what's happening with X, Y, and Z? And I said, I'm not sure. So-and-so's running that. So-and-so's leading on that. And he said, but isn't that your responsibility? And I said, yeah, but it's taken care of. And he goes, but you don't know what's happening. And I said, I don't know what's happening right now, but I do know that she knows when to talk to me if there's a problem I'm not sure of. And I trust that she's capable because I've not heard from her. And he thought that was really weird. And I said, you haven't hired me to know everything. Because if I know everything, then we're constrained with what I know. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. And of course, if I know everything, why do you need to be my boss? Just something that occurred to me. One of the things that I have said over the years and some people take this the wrong way and some people have figured it out. I don't always understand. I still don't understand it myself, but I have often said that I'm not smart enough to be scared. And some people say, Max, that's a very negative way to talk about yourself. You should say that you have a fearless soul. And other people are like, Max, I think what you're referring to is the childlike wonder with which people that are not yet grown-up adults approach life. So depending on how you want to take it, but I often think that that there are things that if I really knew what I was getting into, I wouldn't have done them. They would have scared me. And I think that maybe one of these days I'm going to talk about how not being able to see the audience might be one of the reasons why people think I look like such a calm, collected speaker. It looks like I'm never really bothered at the mic, and but it could just be that that I don't know I'm supposed to be scared up there when I talk to people in front of a room. I'm not sure.
That makes a lot of sense, and I think something like you said before about uniqueness. I mean, you design your own experiences, don't you? So, and they say that it's the same nervousness that people fear. They say successful people and mavericks see that nervousness as excitement. So if I'm going to do a public speaking event, I don't feel nervous, I feel excited. But my feelings are the same. So if someone describes themselves being nervous, it's the same that I'm feeling, like butterflies in your stomach, feeling slightly sick. Yeah. You're not quite sure what's going to happen. But I'm like, that's how I recognize I'm excited. And I'm not as scared as you are because I'm expecting it. I'm like, this is how I'm supposed to feel.
Yeah.
So I work. So it's not. Oh no, I feel a bit sick. I'm like, oh hey, I feel a bit sick.
But if you can get yourself where you can decide that it's going to be an adventure or an experience, that no matter what happens, there's going to be something that is part of it. That either you meet a great new person, you find something positive that happened in your day. You get some good news in your email, or somebody comes up and tells you some great news. Those sorts of things. If you just decide that it's going to be an adventure, that and the one thing I've learned about speaking, since we were talking about that, is when you go up to the mic, in most cases, the people out there in the audience, the ones that are there either because they wanted to be or because they paid money to be there, they want you to be good. Yes. It's not open mic night. It's not open mic night at a comedy club. They didn't come there to heckle you. They came there hoping you were going to drop some knowledge on them that they could take home and use in their own lives, and hopefully in a year or two maybe be up there on the mic instead of you. So that's one of the things that really helps, is when you start realizing these people want me to be good. They want to applaud. And of course, if you can change the heart or mind of one person in the audience, no matter how small or big that audience is, then you've done your job for that day as a speaker.
Yeah, I think that's a fair point. So before we end, I know your big thing's interdependence. What do you see as interdependence, and why do you think it's necessary?
I see it as a willingness to allow other people to be part of your journey, to be part of your story, and to not only make you better and to allow you to accomplish your goals, but also to put you in a position to help them accomplish their goals. And that by working together, whether it be in a community or a group, or because you connected through something you're doing either in person or online, you allow everybody is able to get to where they want to go, to become that person they want to be, much faster by being part of a community, by having this exchange of offering whatever skills, advice, encouragement, inspiration they can, and in return, being inspired, motivated, and educated themselves.
Cool. And why is that better than codependence?
Well, with codependence, it usually involves helping somebody to do something that's bad for them, something that if they were truly honest with themselves, they would realize is dangerous, if not self-destructive.
Oh, that's a good definition. Cool.
Well, considering you're from the medical field, I appreciate that you like my definition. I was a little nervous there.
That's fine. Is there any question you would have liked me to have asked you?
No, I basically am here to answer whatever questions you come up with. And um, when I do a show, I always tell the guests beforehand, I'm going to ask you at least one question that I personally wanted to know the answer to, whether my audience wanted to know the answer or not. Is there one question you want to ask me for Judith?
Yes, actually. I was wondering, and it's probably a question you get asked a lot, so please forgive me, but how do you blog with the situation that you're in and respond so quickly to things?
Well, part of it is that so many people don't respond quickly that when I respond, it makes me look better. So in actuality, I am very slow when it comes to replying to emails. I'm better with email than I am with texts or direct messages. I'm much more comfortable with my laptop than I am with the iPad or iPhone. I'm doing my best to get to the point where I can do everything without my laptop, but I'm just not getting there as quickly as I would like to. And since I grew up with, my first device was a typewriter, and then after the typewriter, old-fashioned computers. And so I'm much more comfortable with long-form communication, with emails. People often joke with me, Max, you really need to write less in your emails, or at least would you put some more blank space in between your paragraphs so it doesn't look so intimidating when we open one of your emails. So I'm not as good as I am, but there are so many people who, they can go a day or 2 days or 2 weeks sometimes before you hear back from them. So, if you're relatively responsive and you have a sincere desire to be responsive, and people can hear it in your words when you reply to them, that you are doing your darndest to give them the information that they wanted from you, or to answer their questions, or to connect them with the person you were going to introduce them to, whatever you said you were going to do, or whatever they expected you to do. If they feel like you're making a real effort, then it seems like you are doing it much quicker.
Yeah, okay, that makes sense. And I do have another question, actually.
Sure.
Did you have a fear of losing your sight? And if you did, how did you overcome it?
I think growing up in the family I grew up in, where it was like, Max is going to be part of this family, whether he loses his sight or not, that there really wasn't any fear that eventually I was going to lose my vision, and it was going to keep me from doing many things. Because besides, graduating from a traditional high school and college, I'm also one of the few visually impaired Eagle Scouts. I assisted in a business that traveled all over the southeastern United States for 15 years. I did the bookings, and in many cases, I would book events for us a week or two before we got to a town, because circumstances required that we just find somewhere to go that, on that short a notice. When necessary, I set up and took down carnival rides, or what y'all call fun fair or fairground rides. I've had grease all over me at one point or another. I've had a hook a duck game, which we call lucky duck games over here, where the ducks went from regular sized numbers to large print numbers to braille numbers over the course of years of me working the hook a duck. So I just think it was the people around me just really were not they weren't scared about it, so I wasn't scared about it.
That is fantastic. Thank you for that. I really appreciate that. And if we find another subject, would you come back?
I will always come back. I tell you, I have recently had some struggles with fatigue due to some knee pain. They think they have the knee pain fixed, but some days I just don't feel good, and you have to find a way to motivate yourself. And one of the things that I've noticed is that when I do an interview for a podcast or a radio show, whether it's on my show or somebody else's, my energy level goes up. My mood level improves. I feel better. I feel more energized and ready to do stuff, even the stuff I hate doing, because we all have those jobs for our websites and our blogs and our podcasts that we don't want to do, but we have to. And so I feel better. So I'm really going out of my way to book. I've never taken this approach to my interviews before. I've always said, Max, if I can do one a week or so, that's a good thing. But I think since they make me feel so good to do them, my goal now is to do one a day. I want to get up every morning and do an interview. And I'm going to see how that works. It's going to take, it's going to mean more effort as far as sharing those interviews when they go live. And there are going to be days when I'll have multiple shows go live on the same day. That's just going to happen. But I feel so much better. There's the anticipation of getting ready, of moving my laptop to the space where I record when I record video, hooking up my new camera, putting in the headphones, getting dressed, tying my tie, just getting ready to do the interview. It's like, dang, I can't wait for this to start. Let's go do this, So noticing that about myself, I said, and I've been posting this on social media, I want to do more interviews. And so if you can think of a subject where you want me to come back, or if it turns out that that you would like to come on my podcast and be interviewed on the What's Your Excuse show, I'm totally open.
Cool. I will definitely bear that in mind then. That's excellent.
Well, thank you. And I don't like to end without making sure the audience knows this. Very few podcast hosts are doing this for the money, and even fewer of them are getting paid well for doing so. Most of them are doing it out of passion or a sense of obligation to give people like me a platform and an opportunity to share my stories and to hopefully encourage the people listening so that they can make changes or move forward, or if nothing else, be distracted and entertained for a little while. So I always like to make sure that the host, and that's you, Judith, knows just how much I appreciate the time and effort and money you put into giving me this opportunity.
Thanks, Max. I wasn't expecting that.
I'm kind of surprised how few hosts are expecting it when I say it. I'm starting to wonder if the rest of the people doing these interviews need some coaching.
Now that is a maverick idea. Thank you once again for tuning into the Maverick Paradox podcast. I hope you have enjoyed listening to my conversation with Maxwell as much as I enjoyed having it. If you are pathologically curious and would love to find out more about the Maverick Paradox, then please subscribe to this podcast on one of the popular podcast platforms. Alternatively, you could explore our resources on Mavericks at maverickparadox.com or read the Maverick Paradox magazine. We publish frequently each week. If you subscribe, you will get our monthly newsletter. And let's not forget my book, The Maverick Paradox, The Secret Power Behind Successful Leaders. For those that love a good discussion, you could apply to join our exclusive Facebook group. And finally, if you would like to work with us or just interested in finding out more about the Maverick at work, check out our website maverickparadox.co.uk.